and Garrett Sparrow here today to present the TTAC Technology Showcase. Jordan is the TTAC Technology Assessment Specialist, and Garrett is the Director of Enterprise Architecture. It is a matrix tradition to forego expansive introductions, so their bios and other information is available in the Summit app. Please put your questions in the chat, and TTAC folks will address them after their showcase. Thank you for joining us, and I turn you over to TTAC.
Thank you for the introduction. Jordan and I both are pleased to share with you today the virtual technology showcase. We have a lot of great content we're going to try and cover today, and we will jump right into it here. I'm going to change my camera really quickly before I continue. All right, so TTAC is your National Telehealth Technology Assessment Center. We are funded by the Office for the Advancement of Telehealth to help organizations and individuals with their telehealth technology questions. In addition to working with organizations independently, we're also a resource for the 12 regional telehealth resource centers, including the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center, who's our host here today. So there's a question kind of what it is that TTAC does. We provide assistance in a variety of ways. A lot of the work that we do is focused on technology evaluations and publishing of toolkits and online content. These are evaluations that TTAC has conducted on a variety of technologies and topics. You can see the list here of 6 are some of the more recent ones that we've done. To touch on them really briefly, I think the otoscope update is the most recent addition to our website. And we have done a lot of the work that goes into initial market review for a technology assessment. So we looked at what new devices were available. We put them kind of into a summarized list, and then we went to and took an additional step to capture a lot of images on these devices. So you can look at the types of content that can come from, say, a video otoscope, look at the image quality, the clarity, the brightness, without having to necessarily bring all of them into your shop to do your own evaluation. So we provide some of that foundational information as a part of our toolkits. We also allow you to reach out to us to ask questions. And so if you see something on the website, you have questions about technology or devices, we can help answer those. We've also recently done some work on video quality assessment. So that you see that the little image there in the upper right, we took a bunch of software platforms around the start of COVID and ran them through performance tests to see how they worked on different qualities of network, whether that was a high-speed broadband connection or a really kind of problematic satellite connection with lots of dropped packets. And we run all of these videos side by side so you can see how different platforms stack up against each other on different types of networks. So you can use that again to assess your own needs. So we have that and a whole lot of other information on our site. We also do the technology showcase like we are doing here in both virtual and in-person events. Now, the showcase is why we're here today. Often we like to do that in person. It's unfortunate we weren't able to join you in person for your event here a couple of weeks back. We run these events to usually give people some hands-on experience with the technology and with the devices, or in this case, kind of walk through some of the broad trends that we're seeing and give some virtual demonstrations through this virtual platform. We love the individual interaction we can have with telehealth technology, and we think it's important for us to provide that to you in a vendor-neutral environment. So pre-COVID, this was really, as I mentioned, an in-person thing. We traveled to events, and we are hoping to, in the months ahead, start getting back to that in-person format so we can bring you the technology and give you a chance to play with it. So a part of, I'm going to jump ahead really quickly to the map. TTAC, as mentioned, is a part of the broader network of telehealth resource centers, and we are a member of the National Consortium of Telehealth Resource Centers. This consists of the 12 regional centers and the 2 national telehealth resource centers. Now, there is a kind of singular resource that we like to point people towards. In addition to our website, we recommend going to www.telehealthresourcecenter.org, and you can see an assortment of national resources. It's kind of a clearinghouse of all of the different webinars, toolkits, and supportive documents that we've provided on telehealth technology, telehealth program development, and legislative and policy issues. So this is a good jumping off point to a lot of additional information. So today we have a lot of fun items that we want to go over today. First, we want to talk about a couple of trends that we're seeing in telemedicine technology. First, we'll cover some of the key findings of our 2022 technology survey, which Jordan will cover. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing around broadband and the importance of broadband in telemedicine here in the US. We'll talk about trends in the platforms used to provide telemedicine care, provide a live demonstration of some video and audio solutions. We'll talk about exam cam peripherals and how they work and provide some demonstrations. We'll also walk through some direct-to-consumer telemedicine platforms and explain how those work. We have some remote patient monitoring platforms that we're also going to go over and talk about general trends in that entire technology space. We have a quick summary animation that we'll go through if we have time to show how remote patient monitoring technology is used. And then we'll switch to some wearable devices, which is kind of a step beyond remote patient monitoring, and talk about some of the differences between those platforms and the new wearable technology and the trends we're seeing in wearables. And then we'll leave you with some final thoughts and wrap things up. So with that, I'll turn things over to Jordan to discuss our technology survey.
Thank you, Garrett. So one of the key tools that TTAC uses to direct the evaluations, the education and outreach work that we do is our technology survey. So we typically run the survey once every 2 years, with our last survey just ending this last March, so end of March. We had 394 individual respondents from all over the United States. We had representatives from each state and territory. And we would like to just kind of touch on a few key trends that we noted in the survey. So the first trend that we see is we asked a question about the expectation for telehealth growth. And the question specifically asked, in the next 1 to 2 years, I expect my organization to, and the options were either expand the telemedicine program, keep telemedicine the same, reduce telemedicine. We also had an other. What we found was really interesting was that there was an overwhelming number of respondents who believed that telemedicine would be growing in the next 1 to 2 years. So 72% of respondents thought that their organizations would be growing on the telemedicine program. Now, keep in mind, this data is actually from the end of March. So this is really recent and is kind of pre-build up for most programs for COVID. This means that respondents felt that there was additional growth that they could expect on top of the pandemic-related telehealth growth that they've been experiencing. Respondents are not expecting any sort of contraction in telehealth, and 22% believe that the telemedicine levels will at least stay the same. We only had 2% of individuals that expected any sort of reduction in telemedicine. So I would consider this a very bullish view of the role that telehealth can be expected to play within organizations. A second trend that we've been observing is the interest in organizations to expand their telemedicine beyond video conferencing. So for the first time since we began this telehealth survey back in, I think, 2017, actually 2012, was the first survey, I believe, that we put out. Video solutions are not our leading category of technology for what folks are interested in evaluating. We feel that this is likely due to the fact that many organizations have found and kind of standardized on a video solution that works within their organizations. And now they're looking at other technology and other functions that they can add to their video conferencing to enhance the experience for their patients and providers. And we think this is reflected in the next trend that we've seen, which has been a move to more care directed to the patient in the home. With the COVID pandemic, we saw, at least anecdotally, that there was more care being delivered to the patient home. The patient home was kind of the frontier of where telemedicine was happening. And the survey data really helps us show that. It really helps us reflect those changes. So we had, in 2 questions that we had, we found that on the left-hand side that there was a large interest in evaluating remote patient monitoring and tablet-based telemedicine solutions, as well as in the right-hand column, a rise in the number of direct-to-consumer remote patient monitoring and hospital home solutions that were actually being used among respondents. So again, this really reflects the trend that the patient home is really that fastest growing frontier of telemedicine care. So we're going to turn this over to Garrett here, who's going to talk a little bit about how broadband connectivity really impacts the delivery of care into that growing space.
Thanks, Jordan. So as Jordan mentioned, we've seen a shift in the types of questions that TTAC gets asked, specifically around what kinds of technology it is that people are interested in and looking at. And it's been shifting through COVID. I agree with his assessment that the people are likely a little less interested in video solutions today because they've already picked one in response to COVID. Now, the before times, pre-COVID, a lot of the mature technology and telemedicine programs were focusing on providers in one facility, presenting a patient to a provider in another facility to access a higher level of care. This is, think rural clinics asking regional hospitals for consultations, or a rural hospital accessing specialty care or subspecialty care at an urban center. And while broadband was definitely important to connect those facilities, the networking was a bit simpler because we had relatively few endpoints. This was point-to-point telemedicine that we really a lot of focus was on. Now with the COVID, that all changed. It was still point-to-point telemedicine, but rather than being one-to-one, we've had this network that explodes, and we have patients and providers both operating out of their homes, and we really effectively lost control of the network. And telehealth then became intrinsically dependent on residential broadband access. And so when we talk about broadband quite a bit, there's a lot of discussion around it, and there's a question of what is broadband. Put really simply, it's internet access that's always on, faster than dial-up, which is a really broad definition from 2009. The FCC provides a better, more constrained framework around that, and our definition within the US for broadband is about bits per second up and down, currently at 25 megabits per second download speeds and 3 megabits per second upload speeds. And this is faster than it had been back in 2010. And there are pushes to make it a faster definition yet again, to move it to 100 megabits per second upload download speed, or possibly 100 down, 10 up. So it's a changing, shifting definition. So if we change that definition in the future to be 100 each direction, then sites that are currently being served by broadband may suddenly find themselves not meeting that definition. A few things that broadband is and isn't dependent on. It isn't tied to any specific single technology. It's not, some people think of broadband as fiber optic connections to the home or 5G connections. It really can cover copper, a whole variety of different wireless spectrum connections, even a satellite connection, which we know can introduce about a second delay from something going out to the satellite and coming back. That can still meet the broadband definition, because again, it's about the rate of data transfer, not necessarily about the any latency or other delays that might occur in the connection. Well, which goes to the next important point, that broadband isn't really about quality of connection, it's about raw throughput in its current definition. That leaves some challenges and makes it so that you can technically be served by a broadband connection, but if there are a lot of problems, things like jitter, packet loss, you can wind up with a substandard non-ideal video conference or video experience, where you can have issues really fully utilizing the broadband connection because you're having to retransmit a lot of information. I'd also like to clarify, broadband is not synonymous with internet access. I think that in telehealth we sometimes can slip into that shorthand to treat all telehealth services as depending on broadband, when really there are a number of services that don't need that higher level of connectivity. Remote patient monitoring perhaps being a reasonable example, where the data being transmitted generally isn't, you're not sending large images or large video streams. It's small packets of data. So you can still receive care without broadband. You can do video conferencing without broadband. It starts to get more complicated as you get more users on the network and are doing more intensive things. So there's a question, and I think that we saw this really practically through COVID, around who actually has access to broadband. And it depends who you ask, and it depends on how they're measuring it. According to the FCC, whose estimate is based on something called Form 477, they estimate in their official numbers that 14.5 million individuals are unserved by broadband. This calculation comes about because they have self-reported data from internet service providers who then the definition for do you provide broadband service if they provide service to a single household or single business, or if they could provide access within 10 days of receiving a consumer request, then the entire county, or the entire census tract, is considered served by broadband. And so I think, as we all know, that is a bit of a loose definition. It's a little bit generous in how it counts. The FCC actually admits that it's not the best tool for measuring actual broadband access. So if you look at other less optimistic estimates, the group Broadband Now has a 2021 estimate that says it's actually 42 million individuals. And then there's this other interesting one that came out in 2020. I think there's a new data we're hoping to see come out for 2021 sometime soon. And they estimate it's actually closer to 120 million that don't have broadband access. Now, Microsoft, I want to talk about their methods here, because it is really interesting. They're providing updates, software packages to a lot of personal computers, corporate computers, Xboxes. So they're pushing a lot of data out to consumers. They know how much data they're moving, and they know how long it takes for it to be downloaded through all the endpoints that they serve. And so they're able to see not just where is broadband available, but where are people actually using it, which I think is an important part of thinking about access. If you have broadband access in the sense that a fiber connection is available at your home, if you can't afford the actual broadband access, you functionally don't have broadband. And so you need to look not just at where the cables are, but where is it affordable to the community. And there are a number of changes here. Actually, apologize for referencing two here. There's actually 3 changes that have come about here in the last couple of years around broadband. I think end of December, they switched to the Affordable Connectivity Program. It was previously the EBB. This is a $14 billion effort to reduce the cost of broadband access. So it's a consumer impacting stipend effectively, or a subsidy to pay for offset broadband costs. It's $30 a month per household, or $75 in qualifying tribal lands, and also can help offset some of the costs of purchasing new hardware. So this is really focusing on that cost issue. How do we make it so if you do have broadband access in your community or in your home, can you actually afford it? The next chunk of investment there was for the Broadband Deployment Accuracy and Technology Availability, or the DATA Act. And this is working to significantly improve the mapping effort that we have, so we can have more granular, more detailed maps of where broadband is not located. Now, this is still defining where broadband could be delivered. It doesn't include any of the cost data, and there's still a number of gaps in the methodology, but it will be much more granular, and I'm hoping to see that it's a lot more detailed and accurate than the previous maps. Of course, knowing where the broadband is only part of the picture. There's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which includes the $65 billion for broadband investment. So we should see a lot of emotion here in the next few years, both in better mapping for where broadband is, better consumer support, and then better development of actual networks. So switching to kind of back into the more demonstration focused portion of this, we want to talk about some of the video conferencing solutions, or the hardware peripherals as a part of the showcase here. So video conferencing still is generally the most common telemedicine delivery method, whether it's directly to the patient's home in a local setting, like live video, like what we're talking in now. It's the video portion isn't highly commonplace. Some of the major changes in video conferencing over the last 5 years has been a move towards cloud-based video conferencing platforms. Your Zoom, your Teams, products by Cisco. Across the board, there's a lot out there, and they're increasingly easy to use and affordable. This means that most video peripherals now can be used with a low-cost laptop or desktop that's paired through a USB plug-and-play connection. So cameras and audio solutions are both moving that direction. They've been going there for a while, but there have been some changes in how they're developed. Now, many of these platforms integrate both video and audio input and output into a single unit. Whereas these used to be discrete devices, you had your web camera, maybe with a built-in microphone on it. You had a speakerphone or headset. You had a number of devices that get plugged in. What we're seeing currently is the trend to getting everything into one package. We're also seeing, as bigger image sensors and more higher resolution image sensors come out, the 4K and 8K sensors, that allows these single devices with a fixed lens to use one of those larger sensors, use a really large field of view of the room, and then it's digitally cropping, so you still get some of the same pan, tilt, and zoom functionality, but it's all done digitally on a number of the current devices. We're also seeing a number of devices that utilize active speaker tracking technology, where the digital image is cropped to focus on the active speaker, using a microphone to help kind of locate where the individual is and provide that kind of directional view. For our demonstration, we want to show what various web-based video conferencing endpoints look like to the end user. So as Jordan's going through these, pay particular attention to the view, the color accuracy, and the overall clarity of the audio and the video. So the first system we're going to look at is the Poly Studio. The device supports a wide-angle camera with a large 4K sensor. It has remote control support and an expansion microphone that allows you to extend the audio capability of the device kind of further into the room without having to be so close to the device. This is beneficial if you're in a medium or small room. So with that, Jordan, take it away and demonstrate some of those capabilities for us.
Okay, thanks, Garrett. So like Garrett was saying, one of the trends we're seeing is most video platforms are still streaming out at standard HD, which is 1080p. But these large video sensors allow us to do add a lot of the functionality that we would get from a boardroom by giving us a lot of area within the room that we can pan and move around without having to have the mechanical pan tilt zoom motors. The Poly Studio has the ability to take a very wide field of view, and then we can actually zoom in manually in that image and then pan back and forth. And I'm using the remote that comes with it. It also has a speaker pod, so we can actually, or not speaker pod, a microphone pod, so we can actually move the audio closer and further into a room. This makes it a good solution for a medium to large size clinic space, or a medium or a smaller size boardroom conference room space. The active speaker tracking is one of the interesting pieces of technology on this. So if I enable the active speaker tracking, it will actually try to find me at the different places that I move in the room. Now, we find that most of the time this is happening via microphones. It's using the directionality of the audio being picked up by the microphone to find where speakers are within a room. But we have seen some solutions that are actually using image processing to find the faces and shapes of speakers in the room and actually focus based on some of the images that it's seeing. All right, back to you, Garrett.
Great. So next up, we have the Meeting Owl Pro. That's the device number 2. It is I think, fairly unique device in the market. It uses a 360-degree image or sensor, and it has active speaker tracking. And it uses this to capture meeting participants in a relatively small space. The device is generally designed to sit in the middle of a group of speakers or individuals, and then the camera will automatically focus and slice the image to show who is actively speaking, whether that's a single individual or if there are multiple, it'll actually kind of locate them and splice them together kind of virtually into a single frame. And Jordan will demonstrate how that works.
Thanks, Garrett. So here we can see the Meeting Owl Pro. And the first thing that we're going to notice is that at the top of the screen, we have this 360-degree view up here at the top. And this is a single lens that the Meeting Owl Pro is using to capture everything that's happening in the room. And then below that, you can actually see as the device tries to find where the active speakers are in the room and split that up. One of the things about the Owl is it has a really robust audio solution, and it does a very good job of representing the human voice. We've demonstrated the Owl, the basic Owl before, but the Owl Pro has actually added a few new features that we want to share with you today. First is you can actually group numbers of owls together, actually 2 owls together in a nest, and it will actually be able to share the image and the sound from both owls and send that out as a single stream. So if you have a larger conference room and you want to capture multiple participants, it'll actually allow you to pair 2 of those owls together. The second thing that the Owl Pro does, in addition to having better audio and better video, is it allows you to use a phone app to connect directly to the Owl to control the camera function. So I'm just going to take control of my Owl's settings here, and I can actually pan using my phone app here. Apply a little tilt to the image as well. Let's see if we can find me and zoom in on me. But again, generally, and if I reset to autofocus, what the owl is set up to do is it's actually set up to find the speakers in the room by using that active speaker tracking technology with the microphones. The owl is really useful if you've got a group of speakers and then some sort of centralized video platform that you can use. So it works really well in if you're working within maybe a therapy group or some other setting where you can set that owl in the middle of a group of speakers and have them kind of interact around it. All right, back to you, Garrett.
So next up, we have the JVC KY-PZ200. Not quite as catchy of a name as the Studio or Owl Pro. This is a 1080p resolution camera that operates at 60 frames per second. And this is kind of a more traditional pan-tilt zoom camera with the independent audio lens and a motorized unit to move the device around. But it is still usable just like a webcam. So with it 20x optical zoom, so very high optical zoom, and 16x digital zoom, we're able to zoom in really tightly on a subject, which can be useful for certain types of evaluations where you need that really tight view of, say, an eye to look at blink response and motion. Additionally, the physical lens generally is going to offer better image clarity and dynamic range. So you have a broader range of darks before things kind of go all to shadow, and you have a broader range of lights before they go to being kind of blown out into white. And this is much improved over what you get with some of the all-in-one devices with a single fixed sensor or fixed lens. So with that, Jordan, he'll demonstrate some of the features of this device.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a departure from some of the all-in-one audio solution, video solution. So this is only a camera. But what is interesting is we've seen the price of these sorts of units come down significantly from where they were even 3 or 4 years ago. So a device that used to cost maybe about $5,000 is now more in the $1,200 range. And what are we getting? Well, if we put, if we use the lenses, we're actually able to get a significant amount of zoom. And I'm going to actually just demonstrate that here real quick. Jared, if we can go ahead and pin my video just so that it's nice and large. But you can see we can get a substantial amount of zoom from this camera, and the autofocus in it is really pretty quick and responsive. The other thing that we've seen within this market space for these pan-tilt zoom cameras is the motors that power them have become a lot smoother. A lot more, a lot smoother and a lot faster and a lot quieter. So it used to be when you were using a PTZ camera, you had to make sure that you had it very far away from your microphone because you could actually hear the motors in the camera running. But now we can pan and tilt around the room, and the device is actually very smooth and very quiet. So these devices are really useful when you need to really zoom in, capture a lot of detail, and have a really nice, crisp image that 16x optical zoom is going to give you. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Garrett.
Great. So audio solutions are kind of an additional, very important part of the video conferencing experience, and it's a really easy way to improve the patient-provider experience with a relatively minimal investment in cost. As more and more providers are delivering care via telemedicine, and they're delivering care via home or in a busy office environment, these kinds of audio solutions are becoming more and more important. There are two main categories of devices that we see. These are going to be headphones or headsets or speaker pods. Now, while many of the solutions can support wireless and Bluetooth and can be powered by battery, our general preference and our feeling is that for telemedicine, it's preferable to have a wired USB solution. We find that it's more reliable and that the clarity can be a little bit improved because there are fewer technical things that can go wrong between the device and the computer or system you're connecting to. Jordan will now demonstrate 4 different audio solutions: a built-in audio laptop solution for baseline, so this is kind of what you get just out of the box with a kind of standard corporate computer. We'll use a headset, and then we'll move to a speaker puck or a speakerphone or a speaker pod for room capture. And then we'll move to a dedicated room system which is more of a traditional video conferencing all-in-one unit. And as he's going through these, listen to Jordan's audio and see how present he sounds, how close he sounds, and if you get the sense that that interaction feels a little bit more personal. Does he feel like he's in the same room, or does he feel like he's far away? And I think we'll also mute our cameras so he can just really focus on listening to the audio as he goes.
All right, thank you, Garrett. So yeah, I'm going to leave my camera off, and we're going to walk through a few different audio solutions here. The first one that you're hearing is the actual default pinhole microphone that's built into my laptop monitor. Now, these devices have improved over the last 3 to 5 years. We are capturing better audio out of these as before, but it really hasn't kept pace with the other technology changes that we've seen in the market space. This is really where a lot of device manufacturers, especially in laptops, will try to save a buck or two in kind of how they're putting these together. They're going to reproduce your audio, but you're going to lose a lot of the clarity. You're going to lose a lot of the ability to capture things going on within a space more than just a couple feet away from the microphone. And you're going to pick up a lot of noise from the device. You're going to pick up a lot of noise from the room. The second device that we're going to show you is a headset unit.
Now, we found that these have become increasingly popular in the last couple of years here, particularly around COVID. We've had a lot of folks delivering care, delivering, interacting with folks from places that they don't normally. So providers seeing patients from home, being in environments where you might have multiple people in a cubicle situation. So these are the sorts of solutions that really need a more localized audio source. And you should be able to hear the microphone is very close to my mouth. I can talk in a very quiet, normal voice, and you can hear very clearly what I'm saying. This is a sort of solution that you want if clarity is really, really important and you don't mind wearing a headset. I know for a lot of providers and users that the idea of wearing a headset can be really challenging, but you do get really clear, really close audio. Next, we're going to move to a speaker pod solution. And these speaker pods are kind of a product of the last 5 to 10 years. These are kind of USB all-in-one devices that have a built-in microphone and speaker all-in-one. We've seen a lot of these solutions that they look like a hockey puck, or they look like a little brick, and they sit on your desk. They have built-in noise cancellation, so you shouldn't have to worry about feedback from the microphone, having a microphone and a speaker in the same place. And they do a really good job generally of reproducing the human voice. What they don't do, however, is reproduce much beyond the human voice. So if you're needing to have a solution that needs to reproduce a wider range of information, so for example, heart sounds or lung sounds, you're going to need to look for a solution probably that's not in this category, as they are really tuned for the human voice. They're designed to pick up audio within a small to medium space, and they're really good at that particular job. Finally, we're going to switch to one of the room systems that we showed you earlier today.
And using this room system, we can kind of hear the advantages that we get from kind of a more robust audio solution. It captures a little bit more of what's happening in the space. It can pick up my audio as I move around the room. So I'm actually walking across the room, and it can pick me up from various points in the room with about the same amount of clarity. So a more robust audio solution will allow you to capture audio from a larger space and reproduce it better and for a larger audience. All right, back to you, Garrett.
So beyond kind of these base devices for video conferencing, there's also a strong desire and a need to be able to do an examination of the patient. And this is where exam cameras come in. These provide a way for the far side provider to get that closer view of their patients. Now, they used to be, and there are still some that are a bit more complicated, but generally they're moving in the direction of working the same way as a USB webcam, in the sense that it's a plug and play peripheral. You plug it in and then you can switch to it on a video conferencing platform without the need for any additional converter or adapter. Even for those devices that do still use a non-USB connection that may have like HDMI connection or a component video connection, you can, at this point, fairly easily get a converter to make it so it does show up as a USB plug-and-play device. Now, many of the cameras are going to have an interchangeable lens to provide functionality beyond just general examination. You can otoscope lenses for them, dermatological imaging lenses. Some of them have an entire library of specialty lenses. Others are more limited and just provide a basic exam camera functionality. And these come in at a wide variety of cost points. You can spend anywhere from a couple $100s to many, many thousands. And all of them are going to have different feature sets. So with that, Jordan's going to demonstrate two devices, I believe, here that are on kind of opposite ends of the cost feature spectrum.
Thanks, Garrett. So we're going to do right here. Is the Firefly DE65. Now, this is on the more affordable end of the general exam cam lens. It's what I like to call a unitasker, in that it kind of has one job, but it does that job really pretty well for an affordable price. So these devices come in about $650. It has a few different features we want to go over here real quick. First, at the top of the device, we have a manual slider for adjusting the focus of the device. And then if we rotate the top of the lens here, we have a built-in polarization filter. So this allows us to really dial in the focus of an image and then actually apply that polarization that will move the shine from skin. We're gonna, also on the device, we have a built-in light brightness adjustment. So I can go ahead and tap that. And then the other control on the device is a capture button that we can using Firefly's software used to capture still images. So I'm actually going to switch over to this as a video feed. And we're going to show you what this image looks like. So first off, we're going to take a look at our little focus object here. Usually I dial in the focus from the device. Go ahead and pin this so I can see it a little bit better. So as I adjust the slider, we can see as that image kind of comes into focus. You can also see as I adjust the brightness from the built-in LED, and that's off. And then we're actually going to show you some skin detail from the device. So I'm actually going to take the device here. We're going to dial in the focus. And it has a nice little hood on it that actually gives you a really nice distance for most dermatology imaging. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to twist it to apply, and this is actually removing the polarization filter. You can see as the shine of the image and the depth of the image is applied, and then I can rotate it back. And this produces a really nice color image, gives us information about the detail of the structure, but kind of removes that shine. All right, we're going to just go back to you, Garrett, for a second as we set up the Horus 3.
So on the other end of the spectrum here, there's a different kind of device. The one that he showed, as he mentioned, is a unitasker, so there aren't a lot of additional attachments or things that can change on it. The Horus has the ability to support a number of different lenses. I believe the ones that are we, Jordan, correct me, are we going to be going through those other lenses here today, or are we just going to be discussing the base exam lens?
We're going to show the exam lens, but we do have the otoscope lens here, and we'll be able to actually show you what that looks like.
Okay, great.
Okay, here on the bench, we have the Horus 3. This is the new version of the Horus from JedMed. It also has a manual focus wheel here at the bottom. I'll try not to blind people. We have brightness and zoom controls right on the device. What makes this a unique device is not only does it have interchangeable lenses like the otoscope lens here, So we have the exam cam lens attached. We have the otoscope lens here. But it's one of the few devices that we see that actually has a built-in screen. So this is really helpful in that if I was actually streaming this out, I wouldn't have to be looking at the monitor where I'm doing that exam, where my video is at while I'm trying to do the exam. This is really helpful for otoscope because I'm actually able to frame the otoscope image right from the device, find that and take that image. The other thing that it allows us to do is it allows us to go into settings. It allows us to look at stored images and recordings and play those back right from the device. So this device has built-in memory where the Firefly is kind of just a streaming device that just sends the information out. So I'm going to switch over to this device and we're going to show you some of the images that we can get from this device. Okay, so first up here, we're going to focus in on our little focus object. Again, we find that for most exam cameras, having the ability to do manual focus is really beneficial, particularly if we're going to do any sort of otoscope exam, that the distances that we're dealing with are very fine, and being able to set that focus easily on the fly is really an important thing. We're able to adjust the brightness from the device. And like we did with the Firefly camera, we're going to take a quick image of some skin detail. And we dial in the image here. And one of the advantages of having a device with the built-in memory on it is I can actually hit the center button here. I can take that image, I can store it, I can send it for further review, or I can record a quick video showing the exam as it's taking place. All right, back to you, Garrett.
So one other note there, as he pressed the central button on that device, in addition to being able to capture to the internal memory, it also is capable of freezing the image as well, which is a useful function to be able to kind of get everything properly framed, get it focused, and then get it to a still image mode. That can be incredibly useful to keep your provider at the consulting end from getting seasick from a moving image, or if, say, example, you're trying to do ear imaging on a squirming child, you're not having to kind of constantly fight that focus. You get the image you need, you freeze it, and then that's what you can discuss with a consulting provider. So that specific functionality can be incredibly useful for delivering care in a number of different settings. So yeah, outside of the clinic, and these things that we've looked at here so far have been predominantly focused on delivering care into from a clinic to a clinic. You're not going to generally see a patient with an examination camera. While they may have headsets or pucks, it's usually the provider side that is using that, not the patient side. But where we're seeing the shift is in this desire to deliver care to patients in the home. And as that becomes more and more prevalent, the tools to deliver this particular care are becoming more robust and easier to use. So today, Jordan's going to give us a demonstration of some of the capabilities of a unit from TytoCare. It's our multifunction exam tool. This device allows us to capture a variety of patient-collected exams and then review them in a telemedicine visit. Jordan will demonstrate some of these functions for us here now. Jordan, you're
Thanks,
there.
Garrett. Yep. Here we have the TytoCare, and this is the TytoCare Pro. We're going to show you a few of the functions of this device, and then we're going to try something that we actually, you guys are going to be able to see for the first time here. We're going to try to live stream what the UI from our tablet looks like. So, and that's one of the first things we like to point out about this device is it really is designed to work with some sort of smart device. And in the case of the Tyto, they're really designed around the Apple and a nice large tablet like an Apple iPad is a nice thing to have for this. It's a multi-exam device, and it's really designed to be used by the patient. And we'll walk through a couple of the features here. First off, we have the device itself, and actually built into the housing of the device, we have a few different sensors. There's a thermometer, temperature sensor here, and then the basic exam camera is actually built into the device as well. In addition to the functionality built right into the housing, we have a few different lenses that we can apply to this. And they actually mount with just a little magnetic mount. You take it and slide it on. So the first one is the otoscope. We have the otoscope mount here. We have a stethoscope. And then we have a general exam mount with the ability to add either a washable or a disposable tongue depressor for capturing throat images, things like that. So we're going to actually connect this device. The other thing that makes these devices useful or interesting is how they guide the patient through the exam. So this is designed to be used by the patient in their home. So it really walks the user through how to perform the exam. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share out. Garrett, and if we could stop the screen share of the slide so that I can share out the. Okay. Bear with me 1 minute here. All right, so here we can actually see the tablet interface in addition to being able to see the device as well. So if we were wanting to start an exam, we could just hit the start button on the tablet, or we could select it from the device as well. And they're really linked so that we're able to navigate kind of both menus at the same time. So we're going to do an examine forward, which allows us to collect a bunch of information and send that off all at once. In this case, I'm going to say I have a cough. It's started yesterday, and it's moderate. And it's going to recommend a series of exams for us to do. We're going to start with a temperature exam. It's going to ask us to go ahead and take the device and place it just close. And I'm actually grabbing this exam now. All right, 98.4, which is a little warm for me. I generally run around 97, so maybe maybe it's detecting a slight fever because we're in the middle of a demonstration. We can actually go and do a throat exam as well. And it tells us kind of how to do the exam. Will actually give us a tutorial about how to actually capture with a video. Okay, let's go back. All right, so then we hit the start, and it actually on the tablet, you can actually see as we kind of line up. And once it detects the image that it likes, it actually will capture the exam and start recording and send that off to my provider. The last exam we're going to show is the ear exam. So I can attach the specula. Oh, see, and it doesn't like that I attached the specula while we were still in the throat exam. Switch over to the otoscope exam. It'll have me indicate whether I want to take an exam of my left or right ear. So we'll go ahead and tell it we want the left ear. It gives us instructions about how to clean the device. and lets us start our exam. Having the tablet makes it really easy to frame the image and capture what we need. And once I get it kind of lined up, it gives me an indicator, yep, this is what we're looking for. And if you can see in the bottom right there, it's giving us a little indicator that it's recording. Okay. Now that I have this information, I could send this off to a provider, and then right from the tablet, I could actually start a video call with the provider to talk about the different information I collected. So really putting these tools in the patient, giving them the ability to actually direct their own exam is really one of the things that gives providers the ability to reach and deliver care directly into the patient home in a really kind of compelling way. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the share and we will turn it back over to you, Garrett.
All right, so let me see if I can get the right screen sharing again here. All right, so Jordan, can you confirm that we are seeing the share on your side?
Yep, it's up.
Great. So the following animation is going to provide you with a good demonstration of what remote patient monitoring is designed to accomplish. Remote patient monitoring systems allow patients to submit vital sign readings for review by care providers. The benefits come from tracking patient readings over time and looking for elevated or critical values. If concerning values are detected, the system alerts providers who can contact the patient to provide interventions. This allows changes to be made to improve patient health at the earliest point of concern and with the most efficient interventions. A secondary benefit of RPM solutions is that they allow patients to have better engagement with their data and to see if the impact of changes in their lifestyle and medication. Now, typically, patients are enrolled into a cohort generally broken down by disease state, like hypertension or diabetes. A provider or group of providers can manage the readings for the patient's disease state cohort. These cohorts generally run for between 30 to 90 days, but they can vary depending on the needs of the program. Now, Jordan's going to talk to you about some of the components that you might find in a remote patient monitoring kit.
Thanks, Garrett. So there's a lot of variety in the actual devices that are used in RPM solutions. And you're going to find that even within a kit, some of the peripheral devices can change depending on the needs of your particular use case and your particular program. We want to highlight three of the main components inside of most remote patient monitoring kits. First, there's going to be some sort of hub, and these hub devices are really designed to collect information from the peripheral devices and transmit them to the platform. There's varieties of types of hubs, but generally what a hub is going to look like is it's going to be a tablet, it's going to be a smartphone, it's going to be some sort of device. One of the trends that we're seeing within the hub devices is a move towards BYOD, and BYOD stands for Bring Your Own Device. And what this means is that for many platforms, you can actually install an app on a patient's phone, send them the kit, send them different peripheral devices, and through the app, they'll actually pair those devices and actually have them connect directly through the app. This means a reduced amount of cost for deploying the kit, in that the provider will be or the patient will be using their own device. They'll be using their own connectivity to connect that device, and it makes it a simpler thing to do. So this is a rising trend that we're seeing in devices. We're particularly seeing this for platforms or for programs that maybe are only supporting one or two peripherals, or that have maybe a younger population. The other format that we see for these hub devices are phones or tablets that are shipped out from the devices. They are locked down. They are kind of set up to provide alerts let people know kind of how to use the devices, how to interact with them, and they're much more kind of rigidly set up. A lot of times these are used for more traditional remote patient monitoring, where maybe you're monitoring a wide variety of vital signs and maybe you have a slightly older patient population. Another key component of these platforms is going to be the back end, the provider portal. There's always going to be some way for the provider to go in, manage alerts, put patients into cohorts, add patients into the system, remove patients from the systems, and really just track the results that are coming into the platform. And finally, we want to talk a little bit about some of the peripherals that we see in these remote patient monitoring platforms. Really common types of peripherals that we see are blood pressure cuffs, blood glucose monitors, blood oxygen monitors, SpO2 monitors. We see a lot of platforms that ship with scales for measuring weight and temperature. Pretty much all these devices are going to connect primarily through Bluetooth. That's either going to connect to the tablet that's shipped with the kit, or to that bring your own device, BYOD device, through an app. And using an app for that makes the connectivity for that a lot more straightforward. We do see devices that are set up to connect wirelessly through a patient's wireless network. The other trend that we're seeing in connectivity for peripherals is that we're seeing quite a few peripherals that actually support SIM-based technology or cellular technology directly in the peripheral. So what does that mean? Well, that means that instead of having a cellular card inside of the tablet, or a cellular, or using the patient's wireless, a glucometer might have a SIM card based in, and it's going to connect to the local mobile network, so mobile cellular network, and it's able to transmit the data directly from the glucometer, which means that you actually don't even need to have a patient device. You don't need to have any other type of connectivity other than that SIM card that's built into the glucometer. And we're actually hearing the alerts from one of our platforms here real quick. I'm going to turn that down. All right, so this is really helpful if maybe you are only running a single peripheral. So maybe you have a diabetes program, you want to run a glucometer. If you have a SIM-based glucometer, you can actually send that out, run all of the readings right from the glucometer. You don't necessarily need to have any other devices really included in that program. Now, the challenges around this is that there's not always cellular connectivity, particularly in rural and underserved communities. And generally with most of these SIM-based programs, there's some additional costs around actually maintaining and keeping those devices connected to that SIM network. All right, we're going to show you two different platforms real briefly with RPM technology that kind of demonstrates the two different types of technologies that the two different types of kits that we've discussed with you today. So the first one that we're going to look at is the Vivify Pathway Home. I'm going to switch over to the bench cam here real quick. Okay, so this sort of kit is what I would describe as more of a traditional remote patient monitoring kit. It's designed to be sent to the patient. It arrives in a nice box with all the different peripherals in there. Inside the kit, it comes with its own tablet, and it really walks the patient through how to perform the different exams. So I've got buttons here to say they're red. They're saying I need to perform the exams for it. That beeping that you heard earlier, it was actually this alerting me, hey, you've got tests that you need to do. So in addition to the beeping, which you can hear now, it will actually walk me through how to perform the different tests.
Please place cuff around upper arm for blood pressure measurement.
So you can see it's using the text to speak built into the tablet to walk me through it. One of the things that you'll find is, especially for these built-in kits that are on these platforms, the alerts are pervasive and they're very insistent. You'll find that there's no real way to turn them off in a lot of the platforms. They will chime every hour on the hour whenever you have a reading that's due. So it will remind the patients, it will walk them through how to do it, and it won't do much besides kind of collect those exams and put that information in. The tablet here has a SIM card built in, so it actually is the platform for sending the information back to the back end for the provider to review, and actually comes paired to the devices. Now, anytime we're dealing with Bluetooth devices, we need to remember that Bluetooth is not bulletproof. Things do become unpaired. We need to make sure that we kind of have a plan for how we're going to deal with patients if or how we're going to work with patients when their devices become unpaired. Even with a kit that's fully kind of set up out of the box, there is some troubleshooting a lot of times that needs to happen. Next, we're going to look at Livongo kit. Now, this is on the other end of the spectrum. Livongo can be set up either as a BYOD kind of platform where you actually have a Livongo app and you actually pair all the devices in through the Livongo app. It supports a glucometer. It also supports an SpO2 monitor and a scale. In addition to that, all of the Livongo devices actually have built-in SIM technology. So the scale, when you step on it and it takes its reading, it will actually be able to transmit the reading directly on its own without any need for any other peripheral devices. This makes it a really, can be really, really useful if we want to just kind of send a device and we don't want to manage kind of how the patient's interacting with the data. Another interesting thing about the Livongo platform is the glucometer itself actually serves as a portal for connecting to the patient's data. So I can actually use the glucometer. It will actually report back data from the other devices and let me see what my readings are through my scale, through my glucometer, and through my SpO2 monitor right from the glucometer. So being able to deploy these devices with built-in connectivity, with the ability to connect to a patient or a consumer's device makes it really easy to get these out, get these deployed without having to invest in those tablets yourself. All right, I'm going to turn back over to you, Garrett.
So TTAC recently looked at a variety of wearable devices, ranging from rings, bracelets, watches, and headbands. We want to provide you with a quick demo of 2 sets of devices from our wearable review, and then provide you with a quick overview of the technology. First, we want to discuss the smartwatches that include things like Apple Watch and Samsung Galaxy Watch. Now, historically, smartwatches collected a surprising amount of physiological data, including activity and workout tracking, heart rate monitoring, sleep tracking, blood oxygen saturation, but they weren't considered medical devices. Now, this changed since the Apple III and Galaxy III watches both received Class II classifications as medical devices for their ECG functions. Smartwatches are highly interactive with their onboard screens and sounds and vibration alerts, as opposed to more passive activity trackers that simply track your motion and a few other parameters. Smartwatches will remind you of your goals and encourage you to establish health habits around activity and sleep. So Jordan will walk through some of the features of the Samsung Galaxy Watch.
Thanks, Garrett. So yeah, I've been able to use this Galaxy Watch for the last several months now, and really kind of get to know some of the features that are built into it. One of the advantages these watch type peripherals is really how interactive they are. They're going to have a screen. It's going to remind you to get up and move around. It's going to tell you when it's time to get ready for bed. It's going to have a lot of input into your daily life. We can see here on the device, we have a variety of different apps that we can access. Everything from basic fitness tracking. We can actually pull up the ECG as well. It walks you through how to perform an ECG exam using the sensors on the back. There's a pulse oximeter, an ECG, and a heart rate monitor in there as well. Oh, this one keeps locking. I will say that as we've used the ECG, and another function of the Samsung device is the BMI. So it actually has a body mass indicator as well. Those are actually really challenging to use. You have to get them just kind of set right. You have to hold 2 fingers on the device buttons while it's on your arm. It can be a little bit challenging to use, but once you do kind of get it set up, and you're kind of familiar with how to use it, it can give you a lot of good data and let you uh, and kind of tell you how to interact with it. Another interesting thing about these devices is patients might be more interested in wearing, or users might be more interested in wearing them because they do a lot more than just collect vital signs. So you get a lot of functionality. It'll let you look at your messages and things like that. So the stickiness of these types of devices is more than you might see for other kind of more fitness-based wearables, where maybe there's not a lot of additional functionality. But you can use this as a music player. You can use it to look at your text messages that they come up and kind of scroll through your social media feeds. So it adds a lot of stickiness to the device. I use the device primarily for sleep tracking and for blood oxygen monitoring. So I actually had a recent bout with COVID, and I would wear this overnight, and it would track how my blood oxygen was doing while I slept. And it would get, if it got below a certain threshold, I would be able to see that in the morning and see kind of if I needed to seek out maybe some additional help. One of the big challenges with this form factor in its current state is around battery life. The sleep tracking is really one of the key functions that these wearables are really interesting and useful for. And the challenge that we run into is, in a lot of cases, the battery doesn't last more than a day or two. And when it's time to actually charge it, that's actually the time you need to go to sleep. So most of our smartphones and things like that, we charge while we're sleeping. And if we want to get that sleep data, we want to be able to track how our breathing is and how much sleep we're getting at night. We can actually use that and charge the device at the same time. So building in longer battery life, and as these improve more and more, and we get charge times and run times in the 3 to 5 day range from a device like this, will make it more beneficial. Back to you, Garrett.
So next up, we're going to be looking at some of the wearables that are in a ring-based form factor, which I think, Jordan, you might have some more overhead view of the two devices that we looked at, right?
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Garrett. So we brought in two wearable rings, and they kind of demonstrate a few different things that we want to talk about. One is the Oura Ring, and if you have searched for the Oura Ring at all within the last, 6 to 8 months, you will see ads for it everywhere you go. They are they are really promoting this device, and it is a really compelling device. Where smartwatches are more active in how they interact with you, these wearables are a lot more passive, meaning that you just wear them and it collects a variety of data, and it really gives you some insights into some of your health trends. If we kind of look into the device here, we can see some of the sensors that are built right into the device. It's got a SpO2 monitor, it's got a heart rate monitor, it's got a thermometer, and then it's doing a lot of the activity tracking, motion tracking as well. The body metric circle is a similar device. It's a little more bulky. It also does SpO2 as well as heart rate monitoring. The difference between the readings that you get from the body metric circle and the Oura is the body metrics has continuous SpO2, while the Oura is more passive. What really makes these devices interesting is the apps and how they're kind of portraying the data. Oura has decided to kind of really condense a lot of the information they're giving to you into 3 key metrics. So I'm just grabbing my notes here real quick. So it gives you a sleep rating, a activity rating, and then a readiness rating, which is the 2. And having those kind of boiled down, kind of calculated scores for you really lets you see kind of at a glance how things are how you're doing, how things are progressing with your wearable devices. We did know for a lot of the devices that we work with. The smaller form factors, these more passive devices had much better battery life, where we were getting maybe 2 days, maybe a day and a half out of the smartwatches. We're able to get maybe 3 to 5 days out of most of the smaller devices. They connect via Bluetooth. They connect to your app. You will get some notifications through your smartphone, maybe reminding you to move and stuff, but it's a lot more passive than what we see from the smartwatches. All right, back to you, Garrett.
Thanks, Jordan. So most of the wearables right now would be considered consumer-grade devices that can help patients navigate their healthcare trends. In the future, they may be able to serve more as diagnostic devices. Currently, they're more useful to help patients be aware of their health conditions and health trends, not necessarily making their way into the provider workflow or the provider portals. In general, we expect these devices to become smaller, to become more powerful, less obtrusive, and more medically relevant. Additionally, we expect patients to want their telehealth healthcare teams to be more aware of the data collected by these devices. We think artificial intelligence and machine learning are likely going to be used more and more in the future to help filter significant results and potentially report these to healthcare providers. Another element worth mentioning is how active or passive the devices are. Devices with screens such as smartwatches tend to be a lot more active in how they're engaging with users. Jordan mentioned this a little bit, the alerts, the reminders, and the tracking graphics, while rings are a little bit more passive in how they're collecting the data and sharing the alerts, requiring that paired mobile device to really get the meaningful, useful data throughout the day. Improvements in the battery and the form factor are going to be pretty significant in improving how these are used, how long they can be used, and really how impactful they are on helping track health data for patients, and how pertinent they are as medical devices for healthcare interventions. We did note that for many of the devices, there were significant logistical challenges in acquiring them. If you're looking to buy one as an individual or as a consumer, that is definitely reasonable, and that's where they're targeting. If you are a healthcare organization and you're trying to acquire these and set them up on a broader scale, say to do a remote patient monitoring type intervention, and then to build a cohort and deploy devices to them, you start to run into some challenges in both the purchase of them as well as the general setup. Then there are other broader issues around delays. Supply chain is still a bit of a mess. And so the broad electronics device category will occasionally have disruptions and interruptions in supply. So with that, I want to just close up with a couple final questions or comments and thoughts before opening it up to questions here for the last 15 minutes or so. So the few big points I want to leave you with about as we think about telehealth technology, it's important to understand that any technology needs to have a well understood use case and a workflow that the organization is motivated to support. Technology for the sake of technology ends up in drawers and covered in dust, or even worse, with upset providers and healthcare teams or dissatisfied patients. Second, and this is true for TTAC, this is one of our main concerns and main issues. It doesn't matter what the device is, what the technology is, what the workflow is. It's important that you spend time with your hands on a piece of technology before making any purchase decision. It's possible to do a fair bit of market review and an analysis before you actually get the device in, but really before you plan a large-scale deployment, before you really start trying to do too much on the program implementation side, you need to try the device out before you buy it in bulk, because that can really mark the difference between a successful and a failed telehealth program. Finally, the third point is that it's critical to get the whole team involved in the process and really get them to buy in to a particular piece of technology. This is your clinical staff, your administrative staff, your IT department. They all are going to have different views on what makes a good telemedicine device and a good telemedicine program, and you need to include them in the selection process and in the program planning process. Collecting that input and making sure that decisions are detailed and they're actually documenting them and then communicating those decisions out, those are really vital steps in making sure technology works within your organization. So with that, we do have the link to the website here, telehealthtechnology.org, where we have all of our toolkits and resources. By all means, don't hesitate to use that or call us directly on our phone line here at 1-844-242-0075. With that, I'd like to open the floor up for questions and any final thoughts from Anita and Jordan.
Well, thank you, Jordan and Garrett. I really appreciate you sharing about the many telehealth technologies and going through a wide spectrum of things that I'm familiar with, but as always, I've learned considerably more. If anyone has a question, you can put it in the chat. Or you're welcome to unmute and take it from there. If you don't have questions, I do. I wanted to thank you, Jordan, particularly for not only sharing the technologies, but your freckles, your tonsils, and your eardrum picks, and kind of sharing a bit of your experience with some of the technology as well. I was kind of thinking about how this data is used, how the information that the technologies are providing is used. And there's a couple of things that I'm just curious about. In the past, we often talked about a patient-centered medical home, and sometimes technologies appear to have siloed data that it's not getting used by a healthcare practitioner, particularly some of the things you're talking about now that are direct to consumer. So I guess my question / hope, and I'm wondering if you're seeing the same thing, is at some point, will that be addressed and be this information be useful to the healthcare providers? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'm sure Garrett has some feedback on this as well. The walled gardens of healthcare platforms is really a serious issue. It's really challenging to find hardware and software anymore that is not kind of its own thing. And a lot of it comes down to incentives. There's not a lot of incentives for manufacturers and for device manufacturers to create software and platforms that are really interoperable, that really work with other things, and that don't kind of house all the data in location. And there are a lot of incentives to do the opposite, to kind of manage and keep your data in their cloud and kind of manage the experience. Everyone wants to be kind of the Apple environment of healthcare information. Now, the EHRs, the electronic health records, do some of the work to help mitigate that, because getting information in and out of electronic health record means that there has to be some level of interoperability, and it's really something that is demanded by a lot of organizations that are kind of reaching out to these platforms. So it does give you some access to some of the data in and out, but it is a big challenge, and there's not any kind of clear pathway forward to how do we solve getting all the data into one place in a way that's really usable. Garrett?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of challenges. If we focus first at the lower end of the spectrum, a lot of the devices that you can go out and buy at Walgreens or go buy at Walmart, where you are buying consumer-oriented devices that actively market themselves as for education and really avoiding identifying as medical devices. And so if they start entering into that medical space kind of a little bit more concretely and saying, we are providing this medical data to a medical record, I believe that could be causing some of the hesitation or delay, because it is for education and entertainment purposes, not for meaningful healthcare decisions. And as that changes, as more devices like the Apple smartwatches and the Galaxy smartwatches move into the FDA regulated space, I'm expecting to see some increased drive and then getting that data into more of a medical record, which goes to the point about EHR integration. I do think as we move up into remote patient monitoring devices that are medical devices and are part of a kind of a managed medical kind of package, you see more efforts to do integration. And so I was really excited. I'm trying to remember how many years ago that Smart on Fire, the standard web API-based model of integrating with medical records, as that was being promoted, I was really excited that we'd see a lot of innovation there. Talking to developers who have done work in both Cerner and Epic, they're kind of the two of the larger EHRs that are out there, they found spotty uptake of certain data sets. A lot of data is optional. The way that it's managed varies. And so technically there are integration points, but it's still, I think, an underdeveloped solution. I'm hoping that in the next couple of years, we see more and more of that development and get more data through the APIs, but it's still in its early stages, which then gets to the last part of data, which is it's all great to have patient-generated data into a medical record. If you find a way to manage it, the concern then moves to the provider concern. They then have to figure out what to do with all that data, how they manage it and how they triage it, how reliable and consistent are the data coming into them. So the providers then start to have some concern, and that's where additional tooling to do triaging and management and then building out those workflows, really that becomes then the next challenge to it. So we're not where I think we should be in this space. There isn't a great technical reason that we're not there. It's just the incentive hasn't gotten there to force people to make that move yet, I don't think.
I think you make an important distinction between patient education and patient treatment. But they really are together, in that patients will address their own health in addition to other healthcare providers if they know more. But yes, and I totally understand your frustration, and that my employee assistance program will accept my Fitbit data, but my healthcare provider will not. So I'm like, okay, we're both trying to move forward health, but getting people to acknowledge that as data. One more quick question. We've talked about mostly synchronous information and things that are happening. Any thoughts about the asynchronous things that are kind of on the horizon there?
Yeah, we'll again, I'll start, and I'm sure Garrett will have some fun things to add on as well. So COVID really pushed a lot of people towards video, just because it was something that could be done, something that could be done easily, and something that could be set up. Since we've things have stabilized around kind of COVID, and as people have moved kind of past the video, like we had talked about before, we are seeing an increased interest in asynchronous methods of collecting information and sending those off. I think this is, and we've talked about this for years. I think this is still one of the major growth areas for telemedicine. And a big challenge has always been around kind of reimbursement. How is asynchronous care, how are asynchronous consultations reimbursed? And there's not really good models for reimbursement for asynchronous care. And until that really happens, I think it's going to be a challenging model. But it's been proven to work. It's been proven that you can, I think of the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, which is where Garrett and I are both from. We've had a robust asynchronous telemedicine system for decades now, because it's been needed, because you can do a lot of great care around cardiology, around ENT, around dermatology asynchronously, but until the reimbursement models are kind of there, it's a really challenging method to get in. One of the things that has made asynchronous a lot more viable is we have a lot of really great camera technology in our smartphones, in different peripheral devices that can actually capture and send really good information. But again, the reimbursement and the business mechanisms aren't really there to kind of receive it. And kind of, Garrett?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so for asynchronous care, there are two, they can be tools for really improving efficiency of care delivery. This is something we've seen in Alaska. Our ENT department in particular they've been able to reduce their wait time significantly, because when they're doing their image evaluation and their audiogram assessment, they can just look at the picture and the plot and look at the history and very quickly make a diagnosis based on it and have a high degree of accuracy in the diagnosis. We have some research we've done over the years on that. But where that efficiency starts to break down is when the image quality or the whatever the remotely generated kind of data, if that isn't quality, that efficiency goes away, because now our ENT doctors, rather than having to look at a simple image and an audiogram, are now having to reach back out to the clinic to say, can you get the patient back in, capture another image, the audiogram, looking at it, that there wasn't a good seal, so the data aren't reliable. And so the critical part of, I think, making asynchronous work is making certain that the data captured is reliable and that it is getting the view and the data needed by whatever specialty you're sending to. And that's where the consumer generated versus clinician generated data kind of comes into play. A nurse or a mid-level capturing an otoscope image is going to have a better sense of what a good image is, as opposed to, say, a patient in their home. So it's complicated. I think there's a lot of promise. I think we're probably underutilizing it, but you need to make certain that you are capturing the right data and sending it appropriately.
Excellent. Does anyone else want to jump in and have any questions? Well, thank you again for joining us. Appreciate your expertise that you shared, Garrett and Jordan. And I look forward to continuing this discussion as always by your additional things that come out on the TTAC website. So if anyone here has a moment to, with any other, whoops, we're getting some things here. John, we have people saying thank you. Make sure you guys get the kudos here, as well as thanks from me as well for joining our Matrix community.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
Nina.
care. Bye.